The whistle of the steam engine echoed through the valley as the train screeched to a halt beside the dusty frontier platform, clouds of white smoke billowing into the golden morning sky, while townsfolk gathered eagerly, their breath visible in the cold air as they craned their necks for a glimpse of the mail-order brides arriving from the east. One by one, women stepped down from the train cars in crisp dresses and bright shawls, each greeted with cheers and smiles as anxious cowboys rushed forward to claim the brides they had saved for, letters in hand, hope shining in their rugged faces. Laughter and introductions filled the platform like the buzz of a celebration, but at the very end of the line, a lone figure lingered in the shadows of the last car, clutching a battered carpetbag to her chest. Her dress was plain and worn, her hair hastily braided, and though she was young, her posture sagged under the weight of humiliation. This was Elara, the bride no man had wanted. Whispers rippled through the crowd as she stepped off the train, her cheeks flaming with shame as women averted their gazes and men sneered openly. "That's her," someone muttered. "The one they sent as a joke." Another voice snickered. "Poor fool. No cowboy will take her. She'll be sent back east by nightfall." Elara's throat burned with unshed tears, but she lifted her chin and kept walking, determined not to let them see her cry, even as their cruel words pierced her like knives. Just as the crowd's laughter swelled, a sudden hush fell over the platform. Boots stopped shuffling, breaths caught, and all eyes turned toward the edge of town, where a tall figure emerged from the swirling smoke. He was an Apache warrior, his braided hair glinting in the morning light, his chest draped with traditional beadwork over a weathered hunting shirt. His proud bearing radiating strength and defiance. Gasps of fear and outrage swept through the crowd as he strode forward, each step deliberate, his dark eyes scanning the line of brides until they locked on Elara. Murmurs turned to angry shouts. "What's he doing here?" someone yelled. "Get back to your own land," another barked, but the warrior ignored them all. Elara froze as he approached, her heart hammering wildly, unsure whether to flee or stand her ground. Then, to everyone's shock, he stopped directly in front of her. The platform fell utterly silent as he extended his strong, calloused hand, his voice deep and steady. "You," he said simply, his gaze unwavering. "You come with me." Elara's lips parted in disbelief, her mind reeling as the crowd erupted into chaos. "He's claiming her!" a cowboy shouted angrily. "This is an outrage!" Women clutched their husbands' arms, whispering fearfully, while the town sheriff shoved through the mob, his face red with fury. "You can't just take her," he barked. The warrior's eyes flicked toward him, calm but unyielding. "She is not yours to give or deny," he replied, his voice like stone. Elara stared at the outstretched hand, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. No one had wanted her, not even her own kin. Yet here was a man risking the hatred of an entire town to choose her. With trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his. Gasps and curses filled the air as he pulled her gently to his side, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders before turning to face the crowd. "You mock her," he declared, his voice carrying like thunder. "But she is more than your cruel laughter. She is mine now." As he led her down the platform steps and towards the open land beyond, Elara felt the weight of every eye upon them and knew her life had changed forever, though whether for salvation or ruin, only time would tell. The townsfolk erupted into chaos as the Apache warrior led Elara away from the train platform, their shouts mingling with the shrill cry of the departing whistle. Boots pounded on the wooden planks as the sheriff and a group of furious cowboys surged forward, their faces red with outrage. "Stop him!" one man roared, spittle flying from his lips. "We ain't letting no savage take one of our women. Elara stumbled beside the warrior, her legs weak and trembling. Her carpet bag clutched tightly to her chest, while her heart thundered so loud it drowned out the mob's anger. She wanted to speak, to protest, to explain that she hadn't chosen this, but her voice was frozen in her throat. The warrior's stride never faltered, his powerful frame cutting through the crowd like a prowling wolf. He stopped only when the sheriff himself planted his boots firmly in their path, one hand hovering near the revolver strapped to his hip. "That's far enough, Red Hawk," the sheriff growled, his face twisted with fury. "You think you can just waltz into my town and claim a woman like she's a wild horse? Not today." The crowd behind him jeered and shouted, calling for Elara to be taken back and for Red Hawk to be run out of town or worse. Elara's breath came in sharp, shallow gasps, her shame mixing with terror until she thought she might collapse. Red Hawk's dark eyes locked on the sheriff, calm but cold, and when he spoke, his voice was steady as stone. "She was not claimed by your men. They mocked her, cast her aside like refuse. I choose her, and in my people's way, that choice is sacred." His words only enraged the crowd further. "Our way is the law here, not yours," the sheriff barked. "She stays." Red Hawk stepped forward until the two men were inches apart, his towering frame forcing the sheriff to tilt his head back. "Then take her from me," he said quietly, the challenge clear in every syllable. The tension snapped like a taut rope. The sheriff's hand twitched toward his revolver, but before he could draw, Red Hawk moved with lightning speed, grabbing his wrist and twisting until the weapon clattered to the ground. Gasps and screams erupted as the sheriff cried out in pain. Red Hawk shoved him aside, scooped Elara into his arms, as if she weighed nothing, and ran toward the open prairie beyond the station. Elara clung to his neck in stunned silence as the world blurred past, the sound of furious pursuit rising behind them. Bullets cracked through the cold morning air, splintering fence posts and kicking up plumes of dirt. But Red Hawk zigzagged through the scrubland with the sure-footed grace of a mountain lion. When they reached a narrow ravine, he slid down the rocky slope and pressed his back to the stone wall, finally setting Elara on her feet. Her legs buckled, and she would have fallen if not for his steadying hands. "Why are you doing this?" she gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You don't even know me." His gaze softened slightly, though his jaw remained firm. "I know what it is to be unwanted. I saw their cruelty. You deserved dignity, and I will not let them harm you." Above them, the sound of angry voices grew louder as the mob searched the hills. Elara's fear mixed with something strange and warm, a spark of gratitude and hope she barely understood. Red Hawk's hand closed around hers once more, grounding her as he whispered, "Trust me, this is only the beginning. Tonight, they hunt us, but soon, they will know why I chose you." Elara stumbled as Red Hawk guided her deeper into the ravine, the narrow path twisting between jagged rocks, while the angry shouts of the townsfolk faded into the distance. Her heart pounded in her ears, and every breath burned in her throat as she tried to keep pace with his powerful strides. At last, when they were hidden beneath an overhang of stone, Red Hawk paused, scanning the horizon with sharp, wary eyes before turning to her. "We are safe, for now," he said quietly, his deep voice calm but edged with caution. Elara collapsed onto a flat rock, clutching her carpetbag to her chest, her body trembling from exhaustion and fear. Hannah, the baby she had hidden beneath her shawl to protect from the bitter morning cold, let out a small whimper, and Elara instinctively rocked her, her tears dripping onto the child's soft blanket. Red Hawk's gaze softened as he crouched beside her. "The child, she is yours?" he asked gently. Elara nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Yes, she's all I have left." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant call of a hawk circling high above. Then, as if a dam inside her had broken, Elara began to speak, her voice trembling with every word. "I never wanted to come here," she confessed, staring at the ground. "My family arranged for me to be sent west as a mail-order bride because they didn't want me anymore. They said I was a burden after I had Hannah. The man I was supposed to marry backed out when he learned I had a baby. After that, no one would claim me. The women on the train treated me like I was cursed. By the time we reached this town, I thought maybe someone would see me, someone would care. But they just laughed." Her words dissolved into sobs, and she buried her face against Hannah's tiny head. Red Hawk's jaw tightened as anger flared in his dark eyes. He reached out, gently tilting her chin until she met his gaze. "They see with eyes clouded by cruelty," he said fiercely. "Among my people, a mother is sacred. A woman who fights to protect her child is honored, not shamed." Elara's breath caught as she searched his face, seeing no pity there, only fierce respect. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why did you choose me in front of them all?" His expression grew solemn, his voice low and resonant. "When the train came, I went to the station to trade goods, not to claim a bride. But then I saw you, standing apart, shoulders bent beneath their scorn. I saw strength in you, even when you thought you had none. I chose you because you remind me of the ones my people have lost, the ones no one protected." Elara's tears flowed anew, but this time they carried a strange warmth instead of only pain. Before she could respond, the sharp crack of a rifle echoed through the ravine. Red Hawk shoved her to the ground, his body shielding hers as a bullet shattered the rock above them. Voices rang out, closer than before, the mob having followed their trail. Red Hawk grabbed Elara's hand, urgency blazing in his eyes. "They found us. We must move now." He lifted her to her feet and guided her along the twisting ravine, his strong hand never letting go. While Elara clutched Hannah and ran, her fear now matched by a desperate determination to survive. The cold morning air cut like knives against Elara's skin as she stumbled after Red Hawk, Hannah pressed tightly to her chest beneath the thin shawl. The baby whimpered softly, her tiny fists clinging to Elara's dress as they climbed through the winding ravine, the sound of angry voices and pounding boots echoing behind them. Red Hawk moved with the sure-footed grace of a predator, his strong hand gripping Elara's wrist, pulling her along whenever her weary legs faltered. "Faster," he urged, his deep voice steady but urgent. "They are close." Elara's lungs burned, her vision blurring with exhaustion and fear. But she forced herself to keep moving, driven by the memory of the cruel laughter on the train platform. As they rounded a bend, Red Hawk stopped abruptly, raising his hand in warning. Smoke rose in the distance, black plumes curling into the pale morning sky. Elara's heart sank. "What is it?" she gasped, clutching Hannah tighter. Red Hawk's jaw tightened, his dark eyes flashing with fury. "Silas Crowley," he said bitterly. "The rancher who rules this town with greed and fear. He has set fires to drive us out into the open." Even as he spoke, the sharp crack of rifles split the air, and bullets kicked up dirt near their feet. Elara screamed, stumbling backward, but Red Hawk pushed her behind a large boulder, his body shielding hers as he returned fire with his bow, the string singing with deadly precision. Two of Silas's men fell with guttural cries, but more shouts rose in the distance. "There are too many," Elara whispered, terror choking her voice. "We'll never make it." Red Hawk's hand cupped her face briefly, his touch warm and grounding. "You must trust me," he said fiercely. "I know these lands. There is a hidden path that leads to my people's camp. They will protect us." Elara's tears glimmered in the cold light, but she nodded. clutching Hannah as if the baby's tiny heartbeat gave her strength. Red Hawk scooped up her carpet bag and led them into a narrow crevice between the rocks, the passage so tight Elara had to turn sideways to squeeze through. The shouts of their pursuers grew louder, echoing through the canyon like a storm. "This way!" Silas's voice bellowed, filled with rage. "Don't let them escape!" Emerging on the other side, Elara blinked against the sudden brightness as they burst into a wide, open valley. Snow-capped peaks loomed in the distance, and a small cluster of teepees nestled near a frozen river came into view. Relief surged through Elara, but it was short-lived. As they approached, a group of Apache warriors rushed forward, their bows drawn, their faces stern. An older warrior with streaks of gray in his braids stepped ahead, his sharp gaze landing on Elara before shifting to Red Hawk. "Why have you brought her here?" he demanded in their native tongue, his tone laced with anger. Elara didn't understand the words, but she felt the hostility in them, her body trembling as she held Hannah close. Red Hawk stood tall, defiance radiating from his powerful frame. "Because she is under my protection," he replied firmly. Murmurs rippled through the warriors, their expressions hardening. The elder's eyes narrowed. "She is one of them. She will bring trouble to our door." Red Hawk's voice rose, fierce and unyielding. "Trouble already follows us, whether we welcome it or not. This woman is innocent, and the child she carries is blameless. We will defend them as we defend our own." Elara's heart pounded as the warriors argued around her, the fate of her and Hannah hanging in the balance, while in the distance, a thin line of smoke on the horizon warned that Silas and his men were still coming, and the next battle would not wait long. The camp fell into tense silence as the elder's voice rose above the murmurs, his weathered face etched with disapproval, while the other warriors stood in a circle around Red Hawk and Elara. Elara's breath came in sharp, shallow gasps as she clutched Hannah protectively, the baby stirring restlessly against her chest, sensing her mother's fear. She didn't understand the Apache words being spoken, but she didn't need a translation to know she was unwelcome. Red Hawk stood tall and unyielding, his broad shoulders squared, his dark eyes blazing with defiance as he addressed the elder with a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. Though the language was foreign to Elara, his tone was fierce, protective, and full of conviction. The elder's reply was sharp and biting, his hands gesturing toward Elara as though she were a threat that needed to be cast out immediately. A few younger warriors nodded, their faces set with anger, while others exchanged uneasy glances, clearly torn. Elara's heart twisted painfully as she realized that her presence was dividing them. She stepped forward on trembling legs, forcing herself to speak even though her voice shook. "Please," she said desperately, her words tumbling out. "I don't mean to bring harm. I just want a safe place for my baby, a chance to live without fear." The warriors didn't understand her, but her tone and tears carried meaning beyond language. Hannah whimpered softly, and Elara rocked her, showing the tiny child to the circle of men. For a moment, the tension wavered as some of the warriors softened at the sight of the innocent baby, but the elder's face remained like stone. Red Hawk switched to the settler's tongue so Elara could understand. "He believes you will bring Silas's wrath upon us," Red Hawk explained grimly. "He says if you stay, the blood of my people will be spilled." Elara's eyes filled with tears. "Then let me go," she whispered. "I won't let anyone else suffer because of me." Red Hawk turned to her, his expression fierce. "No. You are under my protection. I will not let them cast you out to die." His words sent a ripple through the crowd, and the elder's face darkened with rage. Before the argument could escalate further, a young scout raced into the camp, breathless and wide-eyed. His urgent words sent a shudder through the assembled warriors. Redhawk's body went rigid, his hands curling into fists. "What is it?" Elara asked, her stomach knotting with dread. Redhawk's gaze snapped to her, his voice grim. "Silas's men are near. They are burning the forest to drive us out." Gasps and cries erupted from the tribe as they scattered to prepare for battle. The elder barked orders, and warriors grabbed bows, spears, and rifles, their movements sharp and precise. Redhawk seized Elara's arm, pulling her toward a low shelter near the edge of the camp. "Stay here. Do not leave until I return," he commanded, his tone brooking no argument. "If they come close, run to the river and hide beneath the reeds." Elara's heart pounded wildly. "What about you?" she cried. His storm-dark eyes softened for the briefest moment. "I will fight for you. For Hannah. For my people." Then he was gone, striding into the storm of preparation as the first acrid smell of smoke drifted into camp. Elara clutched Hannah close, sinking to her knees as the baby began to wail. Outside, war drums thundered in the distance, mingling with the roar of the approaching fire and the distant war cries of Silas's men. The storm wasn't coming. It had arrived, and Elara knew that the fate of everyone she loved would be decided before the sun set. The sky turned a sickly orange as thick smoke rolled over the valley, choking the air and stinging Elara's eyes, while Hannah wailed in her arms. She crouched inside the small shelter Redhawk had ordered her to stay in, her body trembling violently as the sounds of chaos swirled outside. War cries, the sharp crack of rifles, the hiss of burning wood, and the panicked screams of horses. The baby's terrified cries grew louder, and Elara rocked her desperately, whispering soothing words through her own tears. But the noise outside was deafening, through a narrow gap in the shelter. Elara glimpsed flames licking up the trunks of nearby trees, and shadowy figures clashing in the smoke-filled darkness. Redhawk's towering form stood out amid the chaos, his bow flashing as he loosed arrow after arrow with deadly precision, moving like a force of nature as he shouted orders to his warriors. Silas's men advanced in a tight line, rifles blazing, torches in their free hands as they set fire to anything in their path. Elara's heart hammered so violently she thought it might burst. She wanted to run to Redhawk, to fight beside him, but fear pinned her in place. Suddenly, a dark shape burst through the smoke. It was Silas himself, his cruel smile illuminated by the flickering firelight. He pointed toward the shelter and barked a command. Two of his men broke off and charged straight toward Elara. Panic surged through her veins. "No!" she screamed, clutching Hannah to her chest as she scrambled backward. The men ripped aside the hide covering the shelter entrance, their hands reaching for her. Elara kicked wildly, her heel striking one man's shin. He cursed and yanked her forward by the arm, nearly wrenching Hannah from her grasp. A primal roar split the air, and Redhawk appeared like an avenging spirit, his knife flashing as he tackled the man holding Elara. The second man raised his rifle, but Elara, acting on pure instinct, grabbed a burning stick from the fire pit and swung it with all her strength, striking the attacker's face. He screamed, dropping his weapon and fleeing into the smoke. Redhawk dispatched the first man with ruthless efficiency, then pulled Elara to her feet. "Run," he commanded, shoving her toward the river path. Elara stumbled through the burning camp, her vision blurred by smoke, Hannah's terrified cries guiding her forward like a beacon. Behind her the battle raged, and she could hear Redhawk's war cry as he fought to drive Silas's men back. Just as she reached the riverbank, a massive figure stepped from the smoke, Silas himself, his revolver gleaming. "Going somewhere, sweetheart?" he sneered, his voice dripping with malice. Elara froze, clutching Hannah so tightly the baby gasped. Silas advanced slowly, savoring her terror. That savage thinks he can steal from me? No one defies Silas Crowley. Hand over the child, and maybe I'll let you live." Elara shook her head fiercely, backing towards the water. "You'll never touch her," she hissed, her fear giving way to defiance. Silas lunged forward, grabbing her arm, but before he could drag her away, Redhawk burst through the smoke. Blood streaming from a cut on his brow, his knife raised high. He slammed into Silas, the two men crashing to the ground in a brutal struggle. "Run, Elara!" Redhawk roared. Elara hesitated, her heart breaking, then turned and splashed into the icy river, clutching Hannah above her head. As she stumbled toward the reeds Redhawk had told her about, she heard the guttural sounds of combat behind her and knew the fight for their lives and their future was reaching its deadly climax. Elara crouched low among the tall, frozen reeds at the river's edge, her teeth chattering from the icy water soaking her skirts as she clutched Hannah high against her chest, trying to muffle the baby's sobs with the edge of her shawl. Her breath came in ragged gasps, each one visible in the frigid air, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it would draw the enemy to her hiding place. Behind her, on the smoky riverbank, the battle raged like some nightmare brought to life. Redhawk and Silas grappled in the mud and blood, their bodies locked in a savage dance of fists, knives, and raw fury. Silas snarled curses as he swung wildly. His revolver lost in the struggle, while Redhawk moved with a predator's precision, his knife flashing as he blocked, struck, and countered with the strength of a man defending not only his life, but everything he loved. The clash of their bodies and the roar of the surrounding fight were nearly drowned out by the crackle of flames devouring the camp. Warriors and settlers fell on both sides, their screams echoing through the valley as the smell of smoke and blood choked the air. Elara's tears mixed with river water as she rocked Hannah, whispering broken prayers, begging for the strength to endure. A sudden scream pierced the chaos. One of Redhawk's warriors went down beneath the crushing blow of a rifle stock, and for a heartbeat, Silas used the distraction to gain the upper hand. With a roar of triumph, he slammed Redhawk to the ground, pinning him with his massive weight. "You think you can take what's mine?" Silas spat, his hands tightening around Redhawk's throat. "I'll kill you, and then I'll take her and that brat, and no one will ever stop me." Elara's breath caught in her throat, terror slicing through her like a blade. She knew that if Silas won, there would be no mercy for her or Hannah. Her gaze darted wildly and fell on a fallen warrior's bow, lying half buried in the mud nearby. Without thinking, she slid Hannah gently into the shelter of the reeds, whispering, "Stay, my love," before crawling through the freezing water toward the weapon. Her fingers closed around the slick wood just as Silas raised a rock to crush Redhawk's skull. "No," Elara screamed, rising to her knees. The sound startled Silas, and in that instant, she pulled the bowstring back and released. The arrow flew straight and true, striking Silas deep in the shoulder. He howled in rage, staggering backward and releasing Redhawk. Fueled by fury and survival, Redhawk surged to his feet, his knife flashing in a final decisive strike. Silas fell to the mud, his lifeblood staining the riverbank red, his eyes wide with shock and hate, before they went still forever. Elara collapsed to the ground, sobbing as relief and horror tangled inside her. Redhawk staggered toward her, his chest heaving, blood streaming from a cut on his brow. He dropped to his knees beside her, his strong arms wrapping around her as if to shield her from the world. "You saved me," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. Elara clung to him, shaking uncontrollably. "We saved each other," she whispered, before scrambling back to the reeds to lift Hannah into her arms. Together they stood amid the wreckage, surrounded by smoke, blood, and the silence that follows unimaginable violence. In the distance, the last of Silas's men fled into the burning forest, their shouts fading into nothing. The battle was over, but Elara knew the scars of this night would never fully fade. As Redhawk held her and Hannah close, she vowed silently that she would never again be the outcast, never again be voiceless or alone. The dawn broke gray and cold over the smoldering ruins of the Apache camp, smoke rising in thin, bitter trails into the pale sky, as Elara stood trembling beside Redhawk. Hannah nestled safely in her arms, the baby finally quiet after a night of terror. Around them, Redhawk's surviving warriors gathered in a silent circle, their faces streaked with soot and grief as they surveyed the charred remains of their homes and the bodies of those who had fallen. Though Silas and his men had been driven off, the cost of victory was written in every hollow stare and bowed head. Elara's throat tightened as she watched the elder step forward. His lined face a mask of pain and fury. He raised his hands, his voice rising sharply in their language, the sound like a whip crack through the frigid air. Even without understanding the words, Elara knew he was blaming her, his gestures sharp and accusatory as he pointed toward her and then at the devastation surrounding them. Her chest constricted as murmurs rippled through the gathered warriors, some nodding in agreement while others looked away uneasily. Redhawk's jaw tightened as he stepped protectively between Elara and the elder, his broad shoulders blocking her from their wrath. He answered in a strong, defiant voice, his tone steady but fierce as he gestured toward the horizon where Silas had fled. Elara's heart raced as she clutched Hannah closer, her tears spilling freely when the elder's face darkened and he shouted back, his hands slicing the air like blades. A young warrior spoke up, his voice trembling with fear and anger, and Elara could feel the crowd beginning to sway toward the elder's side. She took a shaky step forward, her voice breaking as she cried out in desperation, "Please! I never wanted to bring harm to anyone. I just wanted a safe place for my child." The words were meaningless to most of them. But her tone carried raw emotion that made several warriors pause. Hannah stirred and whimpered, and Elara held her up for all to see, her tears glistening in the cold light. "She's innocent," she sobbed. "Don't punish her for the hatred of men like Silas." Redhawk repeated her plea in their language, his voice a rallying cry, but the elder's face remained like stone. At last he lifted a hand, silencing the crowd. In a voice low and deadly, he delivered an ultimatum that even Elara understood through his sharp gestures and Redhawk's grim translation. They had 3 days to leave, or the tribe would turn them out by force to ensure no more blood was spilled. Elara's knees nearly gave way, but Redhawk caught her, his strong arm wrapping around her shoulders. "We will leave before then," he promised fiercely, his storm-dark eyes burning with resolve. "But we will not leave broken. I will rebuild, and I will protect you both, no matter where we go." Elara buried her face against his chest, sobbing quietly as Hannah squirmed between them. Around them, the tribe dispersed to tend to the wounded and rebuild what they could, their voices hushed and heavy with sorrow. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the scarred valley, Elara looked out at the smoke rising from the ashes and realized that though Silas was gone, his hatred still lingered like a poison, threatening to destroy everything she and Redhawk were fighting to build. And in that moment, she made a silent vow. No matter how far they had to run, she would find a way to turn their pain into hope, and their flight into a future where Hannah could grow up free. The sun had barely begun to sink behind the jagged peaks when the sound of hooves shattered the fragile calm, echoing through the charred valley like a drumbeat of doom. Elara's breath caught as she clutched Hannah close, her body freezing as figures emerged from the tree line. Silas and the handful of ruthless men who had survived the battle, their faces twisted with rage and desperation. Red Hawk's warriors raised their bows, but their numbers were too few, their strength sapped from the night before. Silas dismounted slowly, his boots crunching in the frozen earth, his voice carrying with chilling clarity. "You thought you'd seen the last of me?" he sneered, his gaze flicking from Red Hawk to Elara. "You took what was mine, and now you'll pay for it in blood." Elara's stomach turned to ice as Silas pointed directly at her. "Bring me the woman and the brat," he barked to his men. "The savage can watch while I tear apart everything he loves." Hannah began to cry, her tiny fists flailing, and Elara's knees nearly buckled. But Red Hawk stepped forward, placing himself between them, his dark eyes like storms ready to break. "You will not touch them," he said, his voice low and deadly, carrying more weight than a shout ever could. Silas laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that sent chills racing down Elara's spine. "You think you can stop me, Red Hawk? You and your pitiful band of broken warriors?" He motioned to his men, who fanned out, rifles raised, surrounding the burned remains of the camp. Red Hawk raised his hand, signaling his warriors to hold their ground. Then he spoke to Silas in the settler's tongue, so Elara could hear every word. "This ends today. You leave this valley and never return, or you will not leave it alive." Silas's grin widened, his eyes gleaming with madness. Bold words for a man about to die. With a guttural roar, he charged forward, his men unleashing a hail of bullets. Chaos exploded around them. War cries, gunfire, screams of rage and pain. Elara ducked behind a toppled teepee, shielding Hannah with her own body as splinters and dirt rained down. She peeked through a gap, her heart lurching as she saw Red Hawk and Silas collide in the center of the battlefield. Their struggle was brutal and raw, a clash of strength and will, fists and knives flashing as they grappled in the blood-soaked snow. Warriors and settlers fell around them, but the fight between the two men eclipsed everything else. Elara's breath came in ragged gasps as she prayed silently, her tears freezing on her cheeks. Silas slammed Red Hawk to the ground, his knife raised high, but Red Hawk twisted at the last second, rolling free and delivering a crushing blow to Silas's ribs. The sound of the crack carried over the chaos, and Silas staggered, his face contorted with fury. "You can't win!" he spat, lunging again. Red Hawk met him head-on, driving his own blade into Silas's chest with a roar that shook the valley. Silas's eyes went wide with shock and hatred before his body crumpled to the ground, lifeless at last. A stunned silence fell as the remaining settlers dropped their weapons and fled into the trees. Red Hawk stood over Silas's body, chest heaving, his face streaked with blood and soot. Slowly he turned to Elara, his gaze softening as he crossed the battlefield to gather her and Hannah into his arms. "It's over," he whispered, his voice hoarse but steady. Elara sobbed into his chest, clutching Hannah between them as relief and grief crashed over her like a wave. Around them, the warriors raised their voices in a mourning song for the fallen, the haunting melody rising into the evening sky as the sun's last rays bathed the valley in gold. Though the battle was won, Elara knew the fight to build a future had only just begun. The valley lay silent beneath the pale light of morning, the smoke from the fires having finally thinned to wisps that curled lazily into the cold sky. Elara stood on the riverbank with Hannah nestled in her arms, her body aching from exhaustion, her eyes swollen from tears. Around her, Red Hawk's warriors moved like ghosts among the ruins of their home, gathering what little had survived and tending to the wounded. Though the battle had been won, the scars were everywhere. Burned earth, shattered structures, and the empty spaces where friends and family had once stood. Elara's heart clenched as she looked at them. Guilt gnawing at her chest like a relentless predator. She turned to Red Hawk, who stood a few feet away, his tall frame bathed in the soft glow of dawn. His face was solemn, his storm-dark eyes reflecting both grief and strength. He had fought like a force of nature, protecting her and Hannah at every turn, yet she could see the weight of leadership pressing down on him. Slowly, she walked to him, her voice trembling. "This is my fault," she whispered. "If I hadn't come here, Silas wouldn't have attacked. So many people would still be alive." Red Hawk turned sharply, his gaze fierce as he cupped her face in his hands. His touch both gentle and unyielding. "No," he said with quiet conviction. "Silas's hatred was a fire waiting to burn. You did not bring it here, he did. And you gave us something he could never destroy." Elara's tears spilled over, falling onto Hannah's blanket as she looked up at him. "What could I have given you except pain?" Red Hawk's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Hope," he said simply. "You showed my people that even in the face of fear and division, there can be unity. You showed me that love can rise from ashes." Elara's breath caught as warmth bloomed in her chest, cutting through the cold like the first rays of spring. She glanced down at Hannah, who stirred sleepily, her tiny fingers curling around Elara's shawl. "What will we do now?" she asked softly. Red Hawk looked out over the valley, his shoulders straightening with determination. "We rebuild," he said firmly. "Not just homes, but trust. My people will return stronger, and you and Hannah will have a place among us, if that is what you want." Elara's heart swelled with emotion, her voice breaking as she answered. "I want that more than anything. I want Hannah to grow up knowing she is loved, knowing she belongs." Red Hawk's strong arms encircled both of them, holding them close as he murmured, "Then she will. I swear it." As the sun climbed higher, the surviving warriors gathered to honor their dead. A circle was formed, and Red Hawk stood at its center, Elara beside him, holding Hannah tightly. The elder, his face softened by sorrow, spoke in a voice that carried over the valley. Though Elara couldn't understand his words, Red Hawk translated quietly. He speaks of courage, of how even in great loss, life finds a way to begin again. When the ceremony ended, the warriors one by one approached Elara, bowing their heads in acceptance. Tears streamed down her face as she realized she was no longer the outcast she had been when she stepped off the train. She was part of something bigger now, a family forged in fire and blood. That night, as stars blanketed the sky, Red Hawk led Elara to the edge of the rebuilt camp. Together they stood in silence, watching Hannah sleep peacefully in a small cradle beside the fire. Red Hawk took Elara's hand in his, their fingers intertwining. "When the train came, you were alone," he said softly. "Now you are not. You never will be again." Elara leaned into him, her heart full, and whispered, "We survived, and now we begin." As dawn broke once more over the valley, painting the world in shades of gold and rose, Elara knew their journey had only just started. But for the first time, it was a journey filled with promise, love, and the unshakable strength of a family built from courage and choice.